Hello humans, it's just Martine, and today we're going to be talking about how to get out of a reading slump. Just a little while ago, I was feeling a little slumpy for me, and so I thought, might as well spend some time talking to you about how I get out of that frame of mind. Chances are, if you're watching this video, you're either one of my close friends, hi, I love you, or you're in a reading slump, or I guess you could be both, so there are 3 options. So I made this list like a while ago. I'm talking like a couple weeks ago about some things to think about when getting out of a reading slump, and we're just gonna chat about them today. Does that sound good for you? That sounds good for me. I also didn't write these in like particular order, and I never rewrote my notes to order them, so this might be all over the place. Okay, so the first thing that I think is important when dealing with a reading slump is to ask yourself, why am I dealing with a reading slump? And there are a couple different factors I think you need to be assessing, and then each of those has a solution or several that goes with it. The first thing is like you're hitting a reading slump because you don't have time to read. This could just be like you still want to read but you don't have time. In my mind, that's still a slump of some kind. Or it could be you don't have the time and that makes it so that when you do have the time, you really don't want to read. Either of those. It's an issue of time. And if that's the case, then you need to figure out a way to work around time. What do I mean by that? I mean like you need to build it into your current schedule, or you need to flip things around so that you're making more use of tools like audiobooks. You need to take your regular reading routine and adapt it to whatever your new normal is at this period in time. For instance, like in undergrad, whenever it was a show week, it was always really busy and I got less reading done than usual. One, I was just like, it's going to happen, but I still wanted to get some reading done. So I just adjusted my mindset and I was like, okay, this is the time of day where I normally read, but this is the time of day where I can read now. I truly think you can make time for most things that you want to do in life. Like I have a lot of friends who are juggling many more things than I am and they still make time for reading because they love it. So that's like finding time and then using that time issue. But I think the problem that a lot of people encounter when they have very limited time is that when they do have time, they really still don't want to read. And that's an issue with the second factor that you need to assess, which is energy. When you don't have enough energy to read, like you have the time, but you don't have the energy, there are 2 main options here, in my opinion. The first is just rest. Use the time to rest. You can always read later. But if you really want to read, like you know it will make you happy, you just don't have the energy for it, focus on reads that will require less energy. So for me, I'm not going to read like a high fantasy or a sci-fi book when I have no energy to read. I'm going to read a YA contemporary because that's still a genre that I love, but it takes a lot less energy to think about because brain energy is energy. So it's not just a like matter of sitting there and going, well, can I hold a book? That is something that you should consider, in which case switch to an ebook or an audiobook. You might not have the energy to use your eyeballs. Okay, switch to an audiobook, but you might just be like, I need a head empty book. I don't have the processing power to deal with really complex world building or themes. Fine. Get rid of complex things in books. Just read brain candy if that's what you need. The third main issue that could be blocking you from reading as much as you want and thus slumping is a lack of desire to read. I think this one is a really complicated one for a lot of reasons. The first is that reading is just for fun, and so I don't think you should necessarily be pushing yourself to read when you don't want to. There is a line, however, with everything in life where you cross from, I know I'll enjoy my experience with this, I'm just lazy, and so I'm not pushing myself to do it even though it will feel good, and genuinely not wanting to do something. And so I think you need to get good at assessing mentally, like, which side of that line are you on right now? But either way, either side of the line, you can think about books that you'll get excited about. So I know lots of people make those videos like books that will get you out of a reading slump. I don't think I could make one of those videos because I read the most random things, and so I'm not confident I could recommend you a book that would get you out of a reading slump. But you can find plenty of people who've already posted those for genres that you really like. Alternatively, you could go browse around a bookstore, see whatever is calling out to you. You don't even have to buy a book there. You can just look and then get it on your library app or like whatever you want to do, whatever your situation is. Go to a library, stroll around, look at books, find something that you're excited to read. That said, if you're on this side of the line for desire, you really, really don't want to, don't. I cannot emphasize that enough. I think a lot of people spend a lot of time thinking, how can I get out of this reading slump? And they don't ask themselves, should I get out of this reading slump? Is there some kind of toxicity about reading that's sitting in your brain that's holding you back from wanting to read? How much pressure are you putting yourself to read, which is supposed to be a fun thing, unless it's part of your job, in which case, can't help you there. But in general, we're on the book internet in some fashion because we love to read and it makes us happy. Don't force yourself to read just for the content. If you need to take a break, do it. So again, assess which side of desire. For me, I'm usually on the side of desire where I'm like too lazy to do it and it's hard to stay focused. I'll get to focus in a second, but it's hard to stay focused. So then I have to address that, find something that I'm excited to read in that moment, which is another reason why I read several books at the same time, so that whenever I'm like, what vibe am I feeling now? What can I get excited about? Boom, I already have one that I'm halfway through. Let's go. Okay, so like I just said, another thing that you need to be thinking about is lack of focus. So one of the reasons you might be slumping is because you're having a hard time focusing. This is what happened to me recently when I was in my mini slump era. So I was just having a really hard time focusing. My autonomic nervous system was on high alert for some reason. It was probably because I was overexcited about something stupid like Riverdale. The point is, sometimes you're just too keyed up about things, and so it's really hard to actually focus on reading. And that means that you're reading less because you can't focus, and you're also getting frustrated with yourself because you can't focus on reading, but you want to read. So how do you deal with that? There are a couple things. They're not all going to work all the time for everybody, but these are some things that I was thinking about when I was personally slumping in that way. The first thing, obviously, think about reading for shorter sprints. This doesn't mean reading for 5 minutes and then stopping for the whole night. It means reading for 5 minutes, 5 minutes off, 5 minutes on, 5 minutes off, then extend it, 10 minutes on, 5 minutes off, 10 minutes on, 5 minutes off, 15 minutes, 5, 15, 5. A lot of booktube does these really long 50-minute sprints. Good for them. I could never. That's not a sprint to me, that's a marathon. So especially when I'm having these times when it's really hard to focus, I trade with myself. Really short reading sprint, you just have to focus for 5 or 10 minutes. That seems so much more doable. Focus for 5, 10 minutes, you get a brain break. 5, 10 minutes, brain break. Escalate it over time. Teach yourself to focus more. So that's the first thing. The second thing, breathing. As I said, a couple weeks ago when I was really keyed up, my whole body was on alert. So box breathing. I had to remind myself to do a lot of box breathing to kind of get myself in a place where I could focus. Box breathing is breathe in for 4, hold for 4, out for 4, hold for 4, repeat. Do that a couple times, and I find that although it doesn't always get rid of everything that my body is dealing with when I'm in that stage, I'm a lot more willing to think about, okay, how can I get myself to focus right now? What am I thinking? What am I feeling? Instead of just being the next thing that I do, and I do this all the time, is moving in some way while you're reading. Now, people have told me before that they could never do what I do, which is usually pace while I read. I walk a lot while I read. Otherwise, I'd fall asleep while reading, constantly. So I'm always pacing, moving around, all those things. I get that not everybody can do that, but I think you can probably still move in some way. So whether that's using a fidget toy or just shifting positions every 5 minutes or something, getting up, going to a different room to sit for a few minutes and read, hopping around the house in that way, or in your apartment complex going to the common room and then your room and then somewhere else, I don't know, walking somewhere, sitting on a bench reading, okay, walk a few more feet, sit on that bench, just switch it up. That way your body can deal with the energy that it's feeling and your brain can focus more on book. And then the last thing for this is to set aside the book for a minute. Say, I'm not going to read for the next few minutes. I'm instead going to burn off some of this restless energy, because a lot of times when I'm having trouble focusing, I have way too much energy, whether that's anxious energy or otherwise. I don't mean I could run a marathon or anything. I'm still tired all the time, but I have this excess of and often moving around in some way helps for this. So me personally, I clog dance, so I'll put on a couple songs that I have routines for. I'll do that. That really, really helps. For some people, it might be going for a run. You could just do a basic dance party. I do this all the time. Throw on random music you like, dance around your room to it. Who cares if you look weird? You're just doing this to get into the right headspace. So basically burn off some of that nervous energy, because once your body thinks of a normal, healthy way to deal with this energy. It's easier to let some of it go and focus more on reading. You're probably not going to get rid of all of it, especially if you're having a really, really difficult time, but it can help set you up for the beginning of a session of focusing. So like burn off the energy and then you're like, okay, now I can read for 10 minutes. Oh, it's back. Okay, now I'm gonna move while I read. All of these different things, you can combine them, use them together. So personally for me, that's the biggest culprit of me slumping, is not being able to focus because I have like too much happening in my brain skis. And then the last factor that I want you to consider, are you slumping because you've been reading a lot of flops lately? Because I feel like this is a very real thing. If you're on a 2-star streak, your desire to pick up a new book is probably not going to be that high because you're like, with my luck right now, it's probably going to be another 2-star book. And that doesn't seem like a fun time. That doesn't seem fun to anyone. Here, I don't think it's like enough to go around your bookshelf or the library and be like, what's calling out to me? I think you need to stop for a second and ask yourself, like, what has not been working about these books lately? Has it been character types, writing styles? Like, figure out what the it has been and then go from there to try and fix it. So if the issue is like you haven't been clicking with the writing, great. Now that you know that, type into Google like books with such and such type of writing. Okay, list of recommendations. Here we go. Pick off of that. If it's something like characters, you haven't been connecting to the characters, books with really great characters, great. Pick one of those, read it. I think it's really important to ask yourself, why haven't these books been working lately? So that you can avoid that specific thing, instead of just picking another random book being like, well, this one will probably fix it, because it probably won't. I do think an important note here is that some of these reasons could be mixed up, not only in the sense that you can have multiple at the same time, but that one might present as another. So books might all be flops lately. You might be like, well, if I think about it, they had great characters, the plots were good, I just didn't like them. I didn't connect with them, wrong book, wrong time, whatever. I can't figure out. The books, there's nothing really wrong with them. One of them should have been a hit, but all of them were bad for me right now. If that's the case, then maybe it's one of these other things, like a lack of focus, keeping you from really enjoying the book. Like, yeah, this book was good, but this shiny thing over here is holding your attention so much better, and so this book is going to seem terrible in comparison because you're focusing on this other thing over here. You can't really focus here. You're trying, but you can't. So, or like, this book was really technically good, but I'm just exhausted and I don't have the energy to do this, and my brain doesn't work. So even though it's a really great inventive system, I don't have the brain power to read about this magic system, so it didn't feel good to me. And then you go back to like, okay, well, what do I do when I have no energy? Brain empty reads. Yeah, the reason this book has been flopping, it's too complicated. I don't have the energy for it. But I think the most important thing is to not beat yourself up or guilt yourself into reading, because I think oftentimes reading slumps are just signs you've got something else to focus on right now. My major professor likes to talk with me about work-life balance in the sense that it is not an equal, stable thing across time, but instead it is truly a balancing act where one thing requires more at a time than another. So sometimes when I'm having like bad chronic illness week, she's like, Martine, remember, the personal side of this balance needs a lot more of your energy this week. School has to go down because of it, and vice versa. You have a big school week, great. Some people don't put personal stuff all the way down here, but like maybe it's a little lower, you know? Your balance, it's going to be different over time. Same thing with reading and really anything else in life. If you're like, usually I read this much, but now I'm reading this much, there's probably something over here trying to balance the scale, right? This is heavier here. You need to change the mass over here or whatever. You know how balancing works, right? You're just judging yourself based off of what this is doing. But there is something else over here, right? So you need to give yourself some grace, because guilting yourself about it is not going to make your reading slump go away any faster. In fact, it's probably going to prolong it. So give yourself some grace. Just say, okay, even if you can't identify what's happening over here, be like, great, this is low, and that's okay. Non-judgment, radical acceptance. Be like, well, I'm just not reading a lot right now. Cool, move on. I know that's a really hard mindset to get into. It's really hard for me too, but I encourage you, think about it. Just remind yourself. The way to rewire your brain is not to think something once and then be like, I'm cured. It's to tell yourself things over and over and over and over again until you believe them. It's just reading. It doesn't matter. It's just reading. It doesn't matter. It's just reading. It doesn't matter. Let it go. Over and over and over. That's on reading slumps. Let me know if any of this was helpful. If you liked it, go ahead and give it a big thumbs up and comment down below what's your best tip for getting out of a reading slump, and subscribe for more reading, writing, and college lifestyle content. And until next time, bye humans, bye!